Okay, we are now ready for step 7 of the buttonhole bag. We are to the point where we are ready to put on our button and our buttonhole, which is really our last 2 steps of this project. You want to start by working on the buttonhole formula. You've selected a button. It can have 2 holes, it can have 4 holes, it could have a loop on the back. For the sake of this demonstration, my button has 2 holes. We'll talk more about the button in just a moment, but we do need to measure the button. There is a specific formula for the buttonhole. You want to measure the diameter of the button plus the depth of the button, and that's going to determine how long or how wide you're going to make your buttonhole. So we start by measuring the diameter of our button, which is 5/8. This is something that we've already kind of practiced a little bit. Each little line is going to be, sorry, this was 6/8. Each little line is going to be 1/8 of a marking. So if we're lining up right there, that's 3/4 of an inch, which is 6/8. Then we measure the the depth of our button, which is 1/8. So 6/8 plus 1/8 is 7/8. So that's how big I need to make my buttonhole. Now on my flap here, I've got my pocket. On my flap, there's my press mark for my 2 inches. I want to mark right here in the center, kind of close to the bottom of the flap, a capital I. That's what it kind of looks like, is a sideways capital I. I want to make it 7/8 of an inch long. So I'm going to kind of find my center mark, and then I'm going to come up just enough that I can mark my capital I. Once again, I'm using my pencil. I'm going to be sewing right over this in just a few moments. And it just needs to be dark enough that you can actually see the capital I. That's where I want to be sewing. My button's going to be sitting right there once my project is complete. So, just preparing your machine for to sew a buttonhole. In your drawer, you've got a little black bag. That little black bag has all the different presser feet that the machine came with. On the presser feet, there's a little engraved number. We are looking for number 3. There's a little white card in here that actually shows you what each of the different presser feet does and how to change the presser foot, just in case you need additional guidance. We are going to be using number 3. You simply push on the little red button that's at the back of the presser foot right there. Please make sure that you get presser foot number 1 into your little black bag, and at the end of this project of sewing your buttonhole, put number 1 back on your machine. We are just going to set the presser foot, lower the presser foot down onto the sole of the foot, and now I've got presser foot number 3 attached to my machine. The key difference is that presser foot number 3 has little slots on the bottom of the foot that allow for the buttonhole to progress through the machine. So I've got my capital I drawn in my bag. I want to line up the top of my capital I in the center of the view hole and line up the big long bar with the center of that presser foot. I need to make the adjustments on my machine. We have really smart sewing machines here, so we are going to be pushing number 11. You can see the buttonhole image right there. Number 11, it's going to make all of the adjustments on the machine that are necessary, and we are going to, it's ready to start. So we've lined up. We're going to just sew the first couple of stitches. It kind of looks like it sews in the same spot. That's just to reinforce it. It's kind of like back stitching a little bit. The machine's going to do the work. You're simply going to do this step until you get to the point where you see the bottom of your capital I in your view hole right there. Then you push the back stitch button to progress to the next step. It automatically takes the machine and makes the adjustments, and it's going to sew us back up to where we started. You just need to go slow enough that you can actually see where it was and stop when you get to the capital I bar at the top. Then I'm ready for step 3. So I push that back stitch button, and it's going to sew that bar tack across the top, and then it's going to do the right side of my button. Guys, this is something that you have to practice a little bit. As I approach the bottom of my buttonhole, I want to slow down a little bit. I'm to the bottom of my capital I. I push the backstitch button one last time. It does the bottom of the bar tack and does a reinforcement stitch. And then even though my foot is still pressing on the pedal, the machine stops because the buttonhole is done. I lift up on the pedal and I have sewn a perfect buttonhole. This again is something you want to practice. Do not do your first buttonhole on your project. Get out a piece of scrap fabric. Practice sewing. Practice until you get 3 good ones on a scrap, and then you can do your buttonhole on your project. The last step that we need to do with our buttonhole after we clip the threads here, because once again, if you don't clip your threads, your teacher is going to dock your grade. We want to make sure we're clipping the threads on both sides of our project. Now we need to cut our buttonhole open. So, several ways you can do this. The safest way is to fold this in half and use the tip of your shears just like this and just trim between the threads. Be very careful that you do not cut the threads or you've defeated the purpose of doing all the work of sewing the buttonhole. Then you just use your shears, shear points, and clip to those edges. The second way you can do this is using your seam ripper. I do not recommend this method, but some people are really, really good at it. You would just simply stick the point of your seam ripper in through your fabric, and then you would just cut your fabric to that point. Makes me really nervous because your hands have a tendency to slip sometimes, and then you slice through your buttonhole. I would recommend using your shears and just trimming to those threads. This cuts open your buttonhole and you are now ready to sew on your button.